our fish and wildlife resources. In BC, where we have more wildlife diversity than any place in Canada, the challenge is particularly demanding. The wide diversity of species makes the province a more interesting and attractive place to live, but it also makes for a more complex management situation. Just about anything we go to do in industry, agriculture, urban development, road or rail construction will have an impact on some form of fish or wildlife. The policy of the BC Fish and Wildlife Branch is to try and integrate the requirements of wildlife into the rest of the human activity stream and to prevent any species from becoming extinct. There are about 630 wildlife species in BC, and while some are flourishing, others are declining in numbers, and a few are officially classified as endangered. Faced with a totally open-ended growth policy, it seems certain that the endangered list will grow and that some species may well disappear altogether. How to preserve biological diversity in the face of ever-expanding economic growth is our topic for tonight, as we stand on the edge of what some biologists have come to call the species pit.
Biological diversity is it's everything. It's the full variety of life and the processes that connect these different forms of life.
Plants and animals?
And everything else. Bacteria, fungi, all the little creepy crawlies that most people don't see or even know about.
As Jim described it, there's nothing left out. There's some words you could put on it. I think he said processes. He didn't mention genetics, but this is part of it. But he's got all the critters in there, and if we've got the processes, then all we do when we describe it is we break it into different kinds of pieces. We say, okay, let's count species, or we say, no, let's count ecosystems or something. But all of those are potentially misleading because they don't capture it as well as Jim's vague but complete definition.
Bob, what kind of a definition do you use?
Well, I'd use the same sort of thing. I'm really supportive of what was said. I understand biological diversity to be at the genetic level, at the individual level, and at the ecosystem level. And I think it's exactly right. The majority of the creatures that are involved with diversity and with the web of life are unknown to us.
If we were able to go in right after a clear cut or a wildfire, whatever had beetle kill, whatever had eliminated the trees, and get the forest crop going immediately, so there was not this brushy stage with all these forbs and weedy plants out there. If we were able to get that immediately and get the trees planted densely enough that then we would go in and space them later so that all the goodies on the site, all the nutrients were going into trees and not some of the other forms of vegetation, then we're not going to have the animals, whether they're insects or larger animals, that respond to those non-crop species present. They just won't be there.
So the range of biological diversity in that type of forest would be less than the range of biological diversity in a forest that wasn't managed as intensely. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Let me be devil's advocate then. So what, somebody might say? I mean, it would appear as though the forest sector had accomplished a useful public objective by taking a site that had been denuded either through natural process like fire or by logging and reestablish that. Plant a tree for everyone you cut, all that good wholesome stuff.
Yep.
So what's wrong with that?
Well, what's wrong with it are a number of things, a whole lot of things. That if there's a whole lot of reasons why we want diversity, and different ones of us want diversity for different reasons. Some of them are simply moral, that there's an intrinsic worth to every species. Or I'm a parent, I want my child to grow up and be able to see things that I saw, at least the same species. I don't want us to be so productive and so intensive in our management that we eliminate some of those future
That's right. Options.
Some of those futures. They're just futures gone. No manager should be responsible for eliminating an alternative future if we potentially value it. There's practical ones. If we look at the opportunistic and free insect control that happens from forest-dwelling birds, if we have a relatively diverse landscape, the U.S. researchers estimate that the value they're getting from those insects, or those insectivorous birds, is roughly $1,500 per square kilometer per year in 1982 dollars. That's free to us. The other thing that's going on is if we've got diversity out there, we've got a bunch of the weasels and the little killers that are predating on some of the forest pests that would damage our crop. So we get all this for free just by leaving a little more diversity out there. We maintain a healthier forest.
The trees in this young forest are about 20 years old. The area was clear-cut logged in 1967, slash-burned in 1968, and planted in 1969. When it was discovered that large numbers of these trees were suffering extensive damage by red squirrels, this young forest became the center of a fascinating study program.
This stand here that we've been working in of lodgepole pine was about 20 years of age and was fertilized, an operational program. And after that, the squirrels began stripping bark from the trees during May and June and early July each year as a food source. They strip away the bark and feed on the vascular tissues, the cambium and phloem, which can be a rich source of nutrients during the spring period when there's few other alternative food sources available. They generally go after the base of the lodgepole pine stem, and even though they're able to climb the tree, and we think that's because there's a greater concentration of nutrients at the base of the tree as it's passing from the needles down to the roots, or passing from the roots up into the upper branches. And the squirrels really know where to attack the tree. We've been following this work for, about the past 15 years, and in this particular stand, 70 to 80% of the trees were attacked by squirrels after the fertilization program. And this is a very severe rate of attack, and it looked like it would be a good study area for us to try some experiments to try and deal with this damage problem. And one of the experiments which we've seen today, or we'll see today, is the use of an alternative food during the May-June damage period, and that food is sunflower seeds, which squirrels love. We measured the incidence of new attack, how many trees had been attacked during 1989 in the treatment area where the sunflower seed was, and how many trees had been attacked in the control area where there was no sunflower seed. And it turned out that we were able to reduce the amount of damage by 5 times where we had the sunflower seed out. So in 1990, we decided we've got to try and do this from the air, an aerial application by helicopter, and using a hopper slung beneath a helicopter. And over 2 20-hectare blocks, we have done an aerial application of seed with a concentration of about 50 pounds, 22 kilograms per hectare of sunflower seed. And that was put out, as you've seen here, and we'll be looking at the results in terms of how many trees are damaged in the treatment, the aerial application, versus how many are damaged in the control area.
What can you tell me about the population in your 3 stand densities of squirrels?
Well, at Penticton Creek, we've been finding in the low-density stand, which is 500 trees per hectare, there is less than a squirrel per hectare. In the medium density, around 1,000 trees per hectare, there is up to 2 squirrels per hectare. And in the 2,000 trees per hectare, there is 2 or 3 per hectare. In the stand density experiment, which has been going for 1 year now, I mentioned that the squirrels were reduced in the low-density stand, and in fact, in response to that, the chipmunks, which is another species of small mammal which does not attack or feed on trees, they increased in number significantly in the low-density stand where the squirrels had been lower. And this got us to thinking that perhaps we really should be looking at a much wider view of things here and look at all of the wildlife species that are living in these managed stands, these silviculturally designed stands, from the low, the medium, and the high density, and see what the responses are. Perhaps we'll find that even though we've reduced squirrel numbers, we've enhanced the habitat for other species, and we're also going to monitor the vegetation and the forage, look at the species of birds as well. So we're trying to look at this in a holistic manner.
What do you think is going to happen in the future? Will we see more of this sort of thing happening?
Yes, definitely. I think that's going to be the trend from now on, that we're going to be trying to look at both forest and wildlife resources in concert together, because we certainly don't have all the answers right now, and we've got to get away from this polarization of foresters and wildlife people, bring them together so that we can work on these cooperative integrated management projects. And I'm really positive about these next 10 years that its time has definitely come.
The idea that red squirrels could cause serious damage to 20-year-old trees seemed pretty far-fetched at first. We now know that across the province, this damage is substantial, especially in young plantations of lodgepole pine. We are also learning that as human demands on the resource base intensify, more environmentally friendly intensive management will be required for all resources. This is Terry Halloran speaking for Westland from Big Creek in the Monashee Mountains.
Okay, I'm perplexed, you know, and the reason I am is not because I have no faith in the technical process, in the sciences, if you like, of forestry and wildlife and fisheries management and all that, but I'm perplexed because I can't bring myself to appreciate how it is that we're going to continually expand the population base with concomitant increases in human demands upon the landscape for water and living space and agriculture, all of those other things, and not experience a decline in biological diversity as a de facto consequence of more people and those demands.
That's the limit that has to be true if our population keeps growing the way it's growing.
Yep.
Yes, that's an inevitable consequence.
It's going to happen.
But that doesn't mean that we say, well, in 20,050 or 2,500 or whatever, half of these species are probably going to be gone, so let's not worry about them now. Other things may change. We may learn better how to deal with it. We know that we're not going to maintain our current diversity all over the province. I mean, and as much as I'd like to see it, I'm not that daft that I expect it to happen. So it's not going to be the same. What I don't want us to lose are all of our future options, or even a majority of the alternative futures. And I think it's quite possible for us to manage most of our forest types, extract wood fiber, and still have most of the diversity in there, and maybe even all of it. We're not going to be able to extract the wood fiber at the maximum rate that site would allow, but we can still do it if we're prepared to be a little gentler.
We have 4 officially classified as endangered species in BC: the burrowing owl, the marmot, the pelican, and the otter, the sea otter.
You mean 4 animal species?
4 animal species is what I meant, yes. So I wanted to reduce it to animals first. I didn't intend to slate the plant side of things.
You have a botanist at your side here.
Okay, well, let's get to that then. We'll talk about the phantom orchid next.
All right.
Okay, but at least in terms of those 4 species, let us say that they are in jeopardy. Let us say that it's important for us to keep them. Now, there are going to be some associated costs that have to be included in that kind of an objective. So if we want to keep burrowing owls and white pelicans, the citizens are going to have to give up some options in order to be able to achieve that. Now, how do you communicate that necessity to the world, and can that become legitimately adhered to when it's actually going to cost us something in terms of hospital beds or schools or pavement or some other human value that has to be foregone in order to retain that diversity?
That's a bit difficult to answer because so far BC is really fortunate.
Yeah.
All 4 of those species are doing all right. You know, they're officially listed as endangered, but they're doing all right or increasing dramatically, like the sea otter. Since the reintroductions in the late 60s are increasing at about 10% per year.
Yeah, it'll likely be taken off the list in the future.
Yeah. And 2 of those are probably just, or at least the Vancouver Island marmot is probably rare. It's not endangered. It probably never was very abundant. the white pelican almost certainly was never abundant in the province. But we'll list it as endangered because there it is, sequestered on a little island about the size of a football field. So anything happened to that island, bam, the pelicans are gone.
But excuse me for interrupting, but the white pelican is not endangered anywhere else.
Right.
There
and
are thousands of them on
that's
the
the hard
planet.
decisions that we're going to have to make eventually. The spotted owl, it creeps into British Columbia. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to say the U.S. should look after this? Well, probably. That's where we're going to eventually end up, but not right now, because the cost to us right now isn't that high, maintaining the spotted owl. We have some things, talking about animals, Jim can talk about plants. We have some species where we have 70% or more of the world's population, or subspecies. Okay, there we could say we have a moral or ethical obligation to keep these. We're the only place in North America, BC is the only place in North America where we have these large systems, or systems of large prey species, plus all the natural predators. So you go to the East Kootenays and we got 7 large ungulate species. We can go to the Musqueam, we got 8. And all the predators are still there. Everywhere else in North America, we've eliminated one or more of the predators, other than Alaska, but those species aren't near as rich.
Do you think that the spotted owl topic, if you like, as a topic, is one that is based upon technical, biological diversity objectives, or do you think it's more of a political topic?
Well, my understanding of the spotted owl issue is that it's both. I think that it isn't an issue in British Columbia as much, but certainly in Washington and Oregon, it's something that the people who are really concerned about old growth have been able to hook onto, and it's been something really tangible they've been able to hook onto, and there's some legal and policy backups to help further that hook of the spotted owl. But the people who are involved in that movement are also very, very concerned about the biological diversity that would be lost in old growth, and they see the spotted owl as an indicator of the fact of that. So my understanding is the spotted owl is both.
So we got the spotted owls exist on both sides of the international border.
Mm-hmm.
The border is an accidental human-imposed barrier.
That's right.
That's been
Spotted
stuck
owl
on the edge of
doesn't
their
even know
ring.
it exists.
Exactly. But we do have an owl in British Columbia, which is endangered here. You never hear anything about that. That's not a political issue. The burrowing owl is officially endangered, was extirpated once, vanished, has been reintroduced, is making a shaky comeback.
Sure.
Why has there not been a lot of publicity about the burrowing owl? Genuinely and legitimately and technically and scientifically endangered. But the spotted owl has become somewhat of a media favorite, if you like.
Sure.
But has not got officially endangered status as yet. Now that suggests to me that there's a political component to the spotted owl question that doesn't have a basis in science and in the technical fact.
True. Partly it's because burrowing owl doesn't live in old growth forest,
right.
as far as I know. But we do have the flammulated owl, which is gaining some
notoriety.
profile, and then of course the marbled murrelet could become the spotted owl of British Columbia, although our legal and political framework is different than in the States. But certainly the spotted owl is a surrogate for a larger issue.
We're going to have to learn how to do this better. It's either we learn or we let the lawyers resolve it for us in court. And I would much rather we learned how to develop these participatory processes better. I'd rather be involved in it.
Maintaining wildlife species diversity is a laudable goal with a sound scientific basis. But the goal is much easier to define than apply. How much diversity, and where, and at what cost? Those are all major questions which don't get answered by starting down that list of 630 wildlife species, one animal at a time. Furthermore, it is not just people who live in the hinterland who cause threats to wildlife. A wildlife official told the Westland audience recently that on the slopes of North and West Vancouver, between Deep Cove and Horseshoe Bay, hardly a wilderness, the wildlife branch shot about 400 bears in a single season in response to public demand. As ugly as such a scenario seems to be, the real bottom line is that when a wild animal gets in our way or causes us fear or inconvenience, society has always been able to find a way to rationalize arranging its demise. almost within sight of the Lionsgate Bridge, I think we killed 400 bears. Those bears are simply down in areas that at one time they lived. And there's, the essential question is, are we going to have bears or are we going to have high-rises and luxury homes up on the side of the mountains? If you continue to build the homes and whatever to the extent we have in the past, yes, we're going to continue to shoot bears. Experience has showed us that there's not that many places we can take black bears to put them where there's not already a good black bear population. And secondly, we certainly don't have the money to move every single bear.
What type of province do we as the citizens of British Columbia want to have? And is one of the goals of the citizens of this province to maintain the biological diversity that we have? And is that so? So this provincial vision is really important, and is a provincial vision of a land use strategy to maintain the biological diversity, and that's kind of the fundamental base upon which all other decisions are made.
How do we get this away from the, forgive me, I'm being devil's advocate here again, away from the somewhat esoteric and certainly partly aesthetic contemplation of species diversity as some sort of ecological niceness, and relate that down to the fact that we have an employment level to maintain, we have to provide even more jobs, we're going to have to pave more farmland so the people of this expanding municipality have somewhere to live, and the real estate industry, if someone was here representing that segment of the community, would be raising those questions. Not illegitimately, I suggest.
Wow. Bob said it. It's the vision. Now, if we say, for a whole lot of reasons, we started on listing the reasons why it might be really important not to lose diversity, and we never got through the list at all. Jim said the critters that they know and love. Well, it's not just the critters that they know and love. It's some of them that are the miner's canary. That thing's gone. That tells me that we're potentially in trouble. If we look at what's happening to amphibians worldwide, the poor beggars are disappearing. Well, we already know that they're giving us some insight into things like the consequences of acid rain, etc. So, geez, if this is disappearing, who's next?
Sitting there for 45 minutes. Time really goes fast when you're having such fun.
There's 800 species of rare plants in BC, 60 of which are threatened or endangered. I'll just add that.
There are 800 species of
rare species out of about 3,000. These are just vascular plants, flowering plants and ferns.
And what numbers run through that again?
800, between 500 and 800 that are considered rare, and 60 of those are threatened or endangered, and a couple of them have actually become extinct.
Is that because of human use, or how much of that is natural? Are these rare because there just aren't a lot of them, and that's naturally that there aren't a lot of them, or are they rare because...
Some of them are rare because they're naturally that way. Some of them that are threatened or endangered, it's largely because of human activities, because they mostly occur in southwestern BC and the Gulf Islands and eastern Vancouver Island, or in south central
Okanagan.
Yeah, the Okanagan.
What about the idea then of so-called indicator species? Is that a sound process to look to and saying this is instead of describing a site, for example, as interior Douglas fir bunchgrass site, we say this is an elk Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep environment. Therefore, if we've got Rocky Mountain sheep and we've got elk,
we got spadefoot toad too.
Then we got the spadefoot toad as well. Does that work?
I don't think so.
Well, there's some major flaws to the concept of management indicator species. Yeah. But on the other hand, it oftentimes seems to be the only realistic way to manage it. I'm thinking of forest management here. Like maybe brown creepers are a good indicator of high volume old growth stands.
Because you find them in old growth and you do not find them...
Yeah, and they seem to require the stands that have got a lot of timber in them. So maybe they're indicative of that type of productive old growth forest. We don't know enough about brown creepers yet, but that's a possibility. And maybe they can indicate what else that productive forest stands for and what else lives in it. But as Fred said, there are some major flaws in the concept. Well, humans are part of overall biological diversity.
That's right.
The present type of human activity is, if I could put it, perverse and ultimately self-destructive. So
That's right, but I think it's a really
we have to
important
wake up.
It's a really important point to recognize that humans are part of the biological diversity. It's absolutely essential for us to start to vision that and to start to thoroughly understand that.
We are now come to feel collectively guilty about lost species like the passenger pigeon and the Eskimo curlew, perhaps with some justification since both those extinctions were caused by man. Perhaps it is the absolute finality of extinction that moves us, or its obvious emotional overtones. Maybe, in contemplating the fragile nature of any species now living on Earth, we are reminded that our own presence here has been in doubt a number of times and could well be again. Species extinction is not new. Survival of the fittest, natural selection, and all that. Death is as old as life. I have read that there are more extinct species than living ones. In fact, compared to the millions of extinct species that have been lost over the centuries, the number of live species today is almost insignificant. Man is likely the newest species, but no one is totally sure. Man is also the only species that has the ability to bring about the extinction of other species. Man is also the only species that seems to care. I'm Mike Halloran for Westland. Good night.
Westland program purpose is to provide information on the state of BC's natural resources and the progress made at achieving integrated use and sustainable development. Comments are welcome and may be addressed to Westland, Box 1090, Caslow, BC, VOG 1MO. Funding for Westland is provided by the Association of BC Professional Foresters, Association of Professional Biologists of BC, BC Ministry of Crown Lands, the BC Ministry of Environment, BC Ministry of Forests, the Council of Forest Industries, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans of Canada, Forestry Canada, Forests Forever, and the Okanagan region of the BC Wildlife Federation.